everybody, and welcome back to the Drive Pink Dialogue. And today we're continuing the conversation about Tata Martino, who is set to leave Inter Miami after this season. He will have his final press conference with Jorge Mas and Raul Sanllehi tomorrow. I think it'll be really interesting, and we should talk about what could come out of that. But for now, I'm your host, Scotty. I'm here with my co-host, Saur. How are you feeling this evening, my man?
Well, I'm very disappointed that my bingo card has been ruined from the get-go. So all the assumptions that you and I came up with in the postseason scenario have just been absolutely tossed out the window, and we're going to have to start from scratch. That was unexpected. I still remember when you sent me that text that Tata has been sacked or Tata Martino is leaving. I did not believe you. I thought you were pulling my leg, and then it actually happened. Looks like the club has a lot more ambitions than we gave them credit for. So kudos to them for that. I'm sure we're going to get into it. I have a few thoughts about it, but we're going to dive deeper. But first, how are you feeling, my friend?
I'm feeling good. I was actually thinking about our bingo cards today, and I am very glad that I put Inter Miami keeping Tata all the way in that far right corner to not be too disruptive. I still feel like I have some very good paths to get bingo. Yours, on the other hand, felt a little less strategic, and you're not off to a great start.
Mine was straight in the middle in that center row, so I'm absolutely screwed. I don't know how it's going to pan out, but I am still confident in my ability, so I think we'll win.
Yeah. Well, one of us will certainly win. I think that's for sure. This episode is all about Inter Miami's head coaching role or managerial role. We were going to do our top 20 draft when we left on Monday, but I think this is probably worth talking about. I did go live and give my thoughts on Tata Martino's departure over when it happened, half an hour after news broke, but we didn't get your thoughts. So before we get into some of the ideas we want to talk about and some of the things we have planned, I just want to get your instant reaction. How are you feeling about it? And what is your reaction?
I'll be honest, it was a bit bittersweet because I'm not a big fan of Tata Martino, but he has achieved a lot of things this season. So first of all, I think we should just thank him for everything he's done for this club. 2 trophies in 2 seasons is not a joke. And he coached this team really well up until a certain point, but it feels like we reached that ceiling. And there was some sense of frustration from my side, at least personally, when I watched games in terms of how he coached them, his team selection and stuff. So I think I'm okay with this decision. I'm happy with this decision, but it's all going to depend on who's going to replace him, right? If I'm thinking about it, I don't have too many people off the top of my head, and it'll be really interesting what choice they go for. But a known devil is always better than an unknown devil. So I want to see what the choice is, who they're bringing in, and then I'm going to judge this decision. But initially, I'm okay with it. I'm on the fence 50-50. I would have been fine if he'd stayed. I'm fine if he goes. So
if you felt a little bit stronger about this a week and a half ago, if I recall
I've thought about it a lot more, and you'll understand exactly why I'm feeling this way. I will say, emotionally speaking, I'm happy, more happy than I'm sad, because I think this Inter Miami team needs a little bit of fresh ideas. And it almost felt like towards the end of the season, we'd run out of some exciting ideas, and we were stringing along with Tata Martino's stubbornness, and as you say, he was a bit burro-headed. So I'm glad that we're going to get someone new in, and I'm actually really excited to see who they bring in. And our tactical analysis, at least, is going to be fun next season, right? We're going to have to think about a few new things. We're going to see a few new experimentations, and whoever comes in has to deal with a lot of dynamics of this team.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I, for one, think that's exciting for Inter Miami. You pinpointed it, I think, a little bit without saying it directly, is I don't think Tata Martino won us a ton of games with how he set this team up. Not that he didn't win us any games, because he did have some great moments. But I think all too often it was, you called it stale, but I would say relying on the talent to deliver results for us. And while that's a good strategy if you have as much talent as Inter Miami, obviously we can tell now that it's not going to deliver you everything you want, regardless of how many incredible players you have on the field. So I agree with you. I think that this was This was time to hit the reset button on this project because it's not too late to get more out of it than you are currently. And I think if you stick with the status quo, you're just asking for another season where maybe you get 1 or 2 trophies next year. And that would be great for any other MLS team. But going into the year, you have to be preparing to win 4+ trophies next season again. So I'm okay with it. I talked about it on Tuesday, I guess, when it dropped. I feel like I would be okay with Tata coming back, and that's what I expected. But I think this is the right decision.
And Tata Martino was never the project, right? The project at Inter Miami has always been Inter Miami, the club. It's been Messi, the superstar players that we have, the squad that we've assembled. Tata Martino is just a cog in that machine, as unemotional as that sounds. So Tata Martino was never the project. At a lot of clubs, what usually happens is when the coach comes in, the coach becomes the identity of that club. But for Inter Miami, that's not the case. So I'm kind of glad that that's not the case and we don't rely on Tata Martino. And it's not a full reset. It's just a bit of a pivot towards a different direction that we're going to take in the next season. Tata Martino did what he was supposed to do for at least a couple of seasons. Could have done a little bit better, but I'm glad that we're now at least exploring new adventures and new pastures because this team can use a little bit of more refreshing ideas.
Yeah. And it's not just the refreshing ideas. I think it's just a refresh on the sideline, right? We saw what Tata Martino was capable of, and it wasn't what this team needed, I think, at this point. And I think
there's a ceiling. He reached his ceiling, and that's it. There's nothing more to that.
Yeah. And maybe we can spend a couple minutes talking positively about Tata Martino because the standard for what Inter Miami is and could be was raised in part because of his work here at Inter Miami. And I know Messi's going to get the bulk of the credit for that, right? Winning last year's Leagues Cup was obviously on Lionel Messi. Winning the Supporters Shield this year, team effort, but an overwhelming amount of talent made that possible. But the assembly, the not screwing it up in some ways was, at least for those 2 trophies, very much part and parcel with what Tata Martino was doing. And so the raising of the standards from a team that's hoping to make the playoffs into a team that's disappointed if we're not winning multiple trophies, he deserves credit for raising that standard. And he's not going to get that credit from most people, but I do think he should get some credit and praise for that. And I think he had some positive qualities, especially with player recruitment. So he did a lot of good things. It's just a matter of, is good enough for what this team wants? And clearly, I think everyone's saying that it's not.
Honestly, he knows more about football than both of us combined together, right? He's been in this sport for longer than I've probably been alive, I think. So I shouldn't be anyone commenting about his footballing tactician ability. So he did well for Inter Miami. He did a lot of good things. It's not easy being a coach of such a big team with such big personalities, and it could have gone really bad very quickly. He held the boat together when we had some injuries. He brought in some really good players. And when it mattered the most, without Lionel Messi, whatever said and done, he did get us a good string of results. The point record would always be part of his history. He will be part of that points record. And he's done some really good things. More so for me, introducing young players like Noah Allen, Yannick Bright, he finally brought in as well. Diego Gomez gave a chance to Ian Frey as well. Toto Aviles. That for me is more important than anything else that Tata Martino has done for this team. And just bringing in that youth talent to allow them to play some really good games and rely on them for long parts of the season. So lots of positives to take away. And it seems like Inter Miami has parted ways with him amicably. I don't know what the actual scenes are behind all of this. I have an inkling that it's not Tata Martino who's stepping aside, but it's the club who wants him to go, and they're just using some nice words to make him not lose face in public. So whatever said and done, he had his contributions to Inter Miami's great season, and wish him the luck wherever he goes, right?
Yeah, just to that point, I think if Inter Miami really wanted Tata back, he would be back. And so however much he was ready to move on or not, maybe he's getting ready to retire, who knows. But to whatever extent it was his decision, I think the club was fine with it at the end of the day. Just a question from the chat. A says, so where did Tata falter to deserve a happy to see you go attitude? Let you hit this one first.
CONCACAF Champions Cup, Leagues Cup against Columbus, playoffs Atlanta, 3 games. I can name a fair few. The thing is, it's not what he did, it's what he didn't do. In moments that where he was supposed to actually step in and be a coach, he wasn't able to. And I think it left a bitter taste in my mouth, especially that Columbus game. And I keep coming back to that in the Leagues Cup, where he didn't make a single substitution when he was literally watching us lose momentum and watching the team slip from right in front of having a lead. And then Columbus just coming back into that game. I thought that was the perfect time for him to demonstrate if he's a good coach or not. And he did not. For me, that's one moment throughout the season that I'm going to remember. And his inability to play playoff games properly, to actually get a result in knockout tournaments when it really, really matters, I think is what brought his downfall.
Yeah, I don't think he did a bad job. Like, I think at the end of the day, he didn't do a bad job. It's just when you are in this very unique moment that is for a very small period of time, which is the period that we have Messi and friends, you have to be going for the very best you can get. And so it's not about what he didn't do, or it's not about what he did. It's about what he didn't do. And that's thrive in sort of these knockout tournaments that we really struggled with. So that's it. I think that's why he's not back. I think Inter Miami wanted to go deep in all these tournaments. I think they wanted to win all of these tournaments. And the overarching sense was not only did they not win them, we didn't even go deep. We didn't even look like favorites.
You didn't compete
deep into the tournament. And yeah, we didn't compete. And so at the end of the day, that's what it was, right? If we went to 3 finals and lost them all, we would be having a discussion about maybe he can't win finals, but that would be sort of a luxury compared to what we had this year, which was still really good. First place, points record, a lot of good things. But again, this is the best team in MLS history. And for one, I don't think the team's going to be more talented next year. I think that's going to be very difficult. So I think you got to try and upgrade the coaching spot if you can.
Talk to me about the timing of this decision, though, because I think this is perfectly timed. It could not have come at a better moment, because 2 weeks later, and we would have probably already kept on a few players, made some decisions about player contracts. And if Tata Martino leaves then and a new coach comes in, he may not want some of those players. I think this has been perfectly timed, and I'm really glad that it's sort of a clean slate before all the player contracts have been decided and before we've figured out what the roster looks like. I do think this means it's going to be a big offseason in front of us, and there's going to be some exciting moves happening, because whatever new coach comes in is going to have an idea of what kind of style he wants to play, what kind of players he wants to bring. And honestly, I think we've talked about the bingo card. It puts so many of our players who are not on contract in a bit of a jeopardy and a limbo situation. So what do you think about the timing of this? And would you have preferred for us to finalize player contracts before a new coach comes in, or do you think this was just exactly timed right?
I'm curious about the timing just from Tata's perspective, because I think if he knew he was going to leave at the end of the season, he may have announced it a day or two after the season ended. The fact that it's coming over a week and a half later, I think is curious. That to me feels like it's in line with the club being shocked that they exited the playoffs so soon and sort of scrambling to figure out what they wanted to do, taking a week and a half to make their offseason plan, and realizing that maybe Tata Martino wasn't a part of that offseason plan. So that actually to me suggests that this was probably a mutual decision, if not more Inter Miami's decision, just because if Tata knew he was going to leave after the season for a while, he could have announced it sooner than that. It does come a couple days before their end of season press conference, which obviously was scheduled after the news broke about Tata Martino deciding to leave. And so I think we'll get more information tomorrow about, the conversations that went into this. But as far as player decisions, I don't think that the new coach is going to be here in time for all of those decisions, which have to come on the 27th, which is next Wednesday. So to me, it is what it is. If you're a playoff team that thinks they're going to win the MLS Cup, you're not firing your coach before the end of the season, obviously. And so if you, if you're going to move on from your coach, you got to pick a time and do it as soon as possible. So I think the timing is fine. I don't think it disrupts anything from a player contract perspective. I don't think it disrupts their offseason at all, because I do think the club has a clear idea of what they want in their next coach and what kind of players they're going to want to surround that coach with. I don't think it's going to be a coach coming in and dictating how to build this roster moving forward. Maybe of course they'll have some input and some suggestions, but it's not going to be, like you said earlier, bringing in a coach to build a project around that coach. It's going to be, hey, this is Lionel Messi's team. Figure out how to win trophies with it. And ultimately, I think that's where Tata failed the most, because his job wasn't to build a project. His job wasn't to develop young players. His job was to bring home hardware. And everyone in Inter Miami, including probably Tata, understands that what happened this year was not good enough. And we're hearing from Julian Gressel that no one felt that way more strongly than Lionel Messi. So that's what it is. That's the business, right?
I know. Exciting times for Inter Miami fans.
Okay, let's talk about this press conference tomorrow, because Tata will be there, and I'm sure we'll learn more about this decision for Tata to step down. But I'm curious on your overall thoughts on what we might find out from the ownership group about Raul Sanyehu. We haven't heard much from since he arrived, about their offseason plans, about how they felt about this 2024 season. And I think we're going to get an idea of what we might be in for this offseason based on some of the comments that come out from ownership and the sporting director or president of operations, or whatever Sanyehu's title is, tomorrow. So I guess I want to get your thoughts on what you expect tomorrow.
Nothing. I don't expect anything to come out of that press conference. They're going to thank Tata Martino for the job that he's done, thank the fans for sticking together, be diplomatic about it. And I don't think we're going to get too much information about what's happening behind the scenes and what the plans are for the offseason. Maybe an insight into player contracts, perhaps. That's what I want to see.
Well, I guess I'm more asking about, and not to lead into our next conversation, but sort of, if the ownership group comes out and says, this wasn't good enough, we have to do better, that's going to be a sense that I think they're going to be very ambitious this offseason.
They're never going to say that. It's very clear with the way Tata Martino has walked away from the project that I don't think they're going to come out and outrightly say that we had an unsuccessful season. They'll probably frame it in a much more diplomatic manner, and they'll make it sound like this season was an outright success, which we all know wasn't, but it wasn't a failure either. We did set the points record. We achieved some really good things. So I don't think it's going to be a stamp of ambition. It's not going to be much of a war cry to say we're going to go for everything next season. I think it's going to be a very standard interview where Tata Martino is going to give his reasons of why he's stepping away. And the coach, the backroom staff is basically going to talk about what the plans are for the next season, but not in as many words, I think.
I'm not so confident about that. Based on everything I've ever heard, every speech I've ever heard from Jorge Mas, he very much likes to incite energy and build expectations and then work hard to deliver on them, which he does so often. But he doesn't feel like someone that's going to shy away from pushing the envelope in terms of building expectations. There are definitely owners that are more reluctant to be gung-ho about those types of conversations. I don't think Jorge Mas is one of them. And so I'm very interested, because with that in mind, if he is sort of a little humdrum about, what this offseason means and what this past season meant for Inter Miami, I think that'll make me a little nervous about what we can expect this offseason. But of course, I'm probably just reading a little too much into this. And I'm very excited to hear from Sanyehu, who, again, hasn't spoken to the media much. Yeah. And what is his role here in terms of the specifics? Is he intimately involved with building the academy, building the second team, building the scouting department, building the front office out in a way that makes sense for Inter Miami? And how is that different than what was already taking place before his arrival? So I'm very curious about everything that's going to happen tomorrow. And of course, all we have to talk about is what we hope might happen instead of coming back with quotes and dissecting them and everything. But I'm looking forward to it, honestly.
Yeah, for sure. It'll just be interesting to see what the vibe of that conversation is as well. Like, they may not say much with it, but you can definitely judge by the demeanor that they'll have at the conference. So yeah, you're absolutely right. It'll be interesting to see, and we'll be closely following that. And I'm sure when we do our next episode, we'll have a few insights into that as well, and hopefully a few player decisions by that time. We'll see.
Yeah, for anyone that wants to watch that, it's probably going to be in Spanish. So if you don't speak Spanish, you'll probably just have to wait for the quotes to get translated onto Twitter later in the day. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see what comes out of that. Okay, let's talk about standards, because I want to hear Jorge Mas come out and say this wasn't good enough, and we decided when we brought in Lionel Messi that we want to win every trophy, and that is still our ambition moving forward, and we're going to do everything in our power to do that. And that's why we're going to bring in a world-class coach, and that's why we're going to bring in world-class players. And whether that happens exactly how I want it to or not, I am curious about what the backroom thought is and should be for this staff, because I want to see ambition to say this was good but not good enough, and we're going to push the envelope. And I see you shaking your head, so talk to me.
So just to that point, I don't think that's going to happen in this conference. It'll be a little bit distasteful to say that in front of your coach who's departing, to be like, it wasn't good enough, we need to do better. That is going to happen, but it's going to happen when the new coach comes in. And it's going to be like, okay, we brought in this new coach, he's fantastic, and we're going to absolutely go for everything, and we're going to lay down the marker in the offseason. We want to challenge for all trophies. We set the points record. We want to do even better. We want to win more trophies than we did this season. That's going to be a conversation that they have when the new coach is brought in. At least I don't think there is going to be something that they're going to, not in as many words, say it tomorrow. Yeah, they may hint at it and stuff, but I don't think it's going to be that case tomorrow.
Let's move on from tomorrow's press conference to just what they should be doing.
Yeah, so what they should. You asked the question of what the sentiment is back in the back room, right? What are they thinking? A shock. It's as much of a shock to them as it is to us as fans. I don't think anybody expected Inter Miami to get knocked out in the first round of the playoffs against Atlanta, right? They definitely had plans to go much deeper. I think the players were a lot more confident about this, maybe some even overconfident about beating Atlanta. And the backroom staff as well was definitely looking for a much more deeper run into the playoffs. Yes, you may win or lose the MLS Cup. That's a different story. But they for sure expected to go much deeper and challenge for the MLS Cup. So the fact that the season ended very quickly, and the fact that they've had to make this decision with Tata Martino, just goes to show that their ambitions were much higher. And you're absolutely right in saying that those ambitions were not met with Tata Martino, and they think that they need to do better. And they already assembled a great squad this season. So the next step is upgrading that coaching staff.
Yeah. So beyond tomorrow again, I agree with Ash, who says in the chat, they're going to give a spiel about setting new standards of excellence. And that's what they've been saying since they signed Lionel Messi, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's why I think that's still going to be the standard. And in some sense, I think being better is the standard, not even being the best. And as fans, as we want to be the best, we want our team to be the best. But being better than you are now at all times is certainly a nice place to be, right? And that's where I think Inter Miami wants and should be. I guess just talking to you, we talked to some other podcasts over the last 2 weeks. I'm not 100% confident that everyone else is on board with that. I think a lot of people are talking about how, if we didn't lose Sergio Busquets, we would have been where we wanted to be, or Yannick Bright, or, if we didn't get so many injuries during the Leagues Cup, we would have gone farther. Things like that, little excuses for the little things that went wrong, instead of dramatically saying the whole process wasn't good enough if it led us to be open or vulnerable to having one or two things going wrong and delaying our season.
Yeah, I'm not sure how to react to that particular point, but I think the point about setting a new standard of excellence is for sure not lost on them. Or at least that's how they should see it, right? This is a very unique opportunity that they have at their disposal. And if you can achieve 110% of what you want to achieve, then that's what you have to go for. Because this squad is capable of so much more that just one injury to Sergio Busquets should not have derailed our entire season. Just a couple of injuries to our midfielders, losing Lionel Messi for 2 weeks or 2 months should not have derailed our season. That did not derail our season, but just generally, right? You have to ensure that the excellence spreads across the entire team, across the entire coaching staff, across the entire club. And that's how I think it should play out. I completely agree with you. I think the standard needs to be much higher, and this is a unique opportunity for this club to achieve everything. And if you don't live up to it, you're out. As simple as that.
Okay. One of the things that we talked about when we did our offseason primer is how many players are affected by Tata Martino's presence on this roster, because he did have such a big role in assembling this team. A huge number of players on this roster were brought in by Tata Martino, and certainly most of the players on this roster were brought in for Tata Martino. And so you have to imagine that with a coaching change, like in any team in the world, you would expect to see some players feel less confident in their spot in the lineup if the coach that brought them in is no longer there. I kind of mentioned a few names on Wednesday or on Tuesday, but tell me one player that you're thinking is maybe on the bubble. We'll go through, everyone really.
There's only one player that I can think of, and that's Cello Wiegand. Has to be, right? That's like one of the most obvious choices. He seems like the most Tata Martino player, and that's one who's on the chopping blocks. You don't know what's going to happen with him. You don't know what kind of play style, what kind of formation the incoming coach wants to play. And the right back position is often one where you're like, it can be very different from one player to the next. One player can be really defensive, and then another player can be a really offensive right back. So for me, Cello, I think, is probably one of those who is now a little bit concerned about his future, because he was brought in as a Tata Martino player.
Yeah, I think Cello is a great one to start off with, because he was given so much leeway by Tata Martino, even when it felt like Inter Miami could get a potential upgrade at right back with Ian Frey. When he came in, he was excellent at that spot. And so, but despite that, Cello always came back into the lineup whenever he was, healthy and ready to go. That feels like one that we're going to find out about real soon, because Inter Miami is going to have to activate that option on him over the next week or so. What do you expect to happen?
That's a really difficult question to answer, man, because I feel like we don't know what's happening behind the scenes and how Cello is viewed by the players behind the scenes. A lot of the decision making may also depend on how the players, and when I say players, I mean Lionel Messi, Sergio Busquets, Jordi Alba, Luis Suarez, how they view Cello Wiegand as well, right? So if they consider him an integral part of the team and he's a really good influence on the squad, he's a really good team player, is very vocal in the back room, then he might actually be staying on. I'm not sure whether that's the case. Like, I'm not sure what's going to be the decision on him. And I'll be honest, I'm a little bit on the fence. I don't know if I can give you a straight answer there. My intuition is that he's probably a little bit in danger of being chopped now that Tata Martino has left. But again, everything I've said so far about the offseason has been proven wrong. I thought they're going to keep Tata Martino. So probably don't even listen to me when I talk about Tata Martino or anything related to him.
I'm looking at my bingo card to see if I need Cello to stay or not.
You do need Cello to stay.
I think that Cello Wiegand is going to cost more once you buy him permanently than if you have him on loan, and I think that's going to be the ultimate factor. If he was on the same salary he was going to be on this year, the same cap charge he was going to be on this year, then I think they could keep him around, whether it was as a starting right back or as someone competing as part of a 1A 1B situation, or even as a backup. You can do that because he's not making much more compared to someone like Franco Negri. But once you have to add the purchase price, the transfer fee that we would have to pay for him, which I think is $1 million, it becomes a little bit less cap friendly for a player that's not hugely impacting your team. And so if they can just go out and find the next Cello, bring him in next year for the same price that Cello cost this year, I think they would rather try and do that. And then while they're doing that, look for a potential huge upgrade, then decide over the next 6 days that we want to commit to Cello Wiegand. So I think Cello Wiegand is going to leave. And I think Tata Martino leaving is a big part of that because he clearly liked Cello. He clearly liked what he brought from a dependability perspective, and to be there and to be solid going both ways, I think is something that Tata really appreciated. But moving forward, I don't know if the front office is going to really feel like he's providing the impact that they need based on what they want. Julian Gressel, to me, when you were leading off, you said there's one obvious candidate, and I thought you were going straight to Julian Gressel because he obviously was brought in by Tata because of the past relationship they have. He played almost as much as anyone on the team this year, and yet it never felt like it really fit in an incredible way for much of the season. And ultimately, when it came to crunch time, Julian Gressel wasn't in the lineup, didn't get minutes. And he even said over the last couple of days that he thought he was going to start or play in game 3, and it ended up not happening. So to me, Julian Gressel is the first player that I'm curious about when we talk about players potentially leaving because of Tata Martino.
I think he's going to go. The simple matter of fact is that there's no obvious place for Julian Gressel on this team. You don't know what his best position is. He's obviously deployed in multiple areas, and that's probably by Tata Martino, who is trying to force him into this team. If a new coach comes in and sees him as a backup right-wing option, he may stay on. But I do think we're planning to upgrade the front offensive line anyways, and I don't think Julian Gressel is the profile of the player that anyone who's incoming is going to be looking at. He was a very much a Tata Martino player. So for me, I would lean towards Julian Gressel leaving. I didn't watch his podcast that people are talking about in the chat, so I'd love to hear what his insights there were and what his attitude in that was. But I don't think he's going to stay. I think he's going to leave as well.
Yeah, and going back to Cello Wiegand, it's the price. He's making over $1 million, and that's too much to be sort of a second team player. And if you're not Tata Martino and you don't have this great relationship with Julian, I don't know what that looks like moving forward. And it's a shame because I like Julian Gressel a lot.
I like Julian Gressel as well, but that's the point, right? Tata Martino himself struggled to fit Julian Gressel in the team by the end of it, which was really weird to all of us when we knew that, okay, Julian Gressel can do a job off the right wing, but Tata Martino didn't even use him. So when the coach who brought him didn't even use him, I think any new incoming coach is going to think, this is not my player. I didn't bring him in. I don't know where to use him. He's costing this much money. It doesn't make sense for him to be on the squad. So, yeah, I think he's going to leave.
Yeah, and again, he's proven himself in the MLS, and he's a guy that can be not just a starter on an MLS team, but a guy that's an impact player in the MLS. And so I think there's a trade market for him. And if you're talking about a team that has to go through the song and dance of acquiring allocation money and acquiring international roster slots, you have an asset that you can offload, save money, and acquire some of the things you need to make next year's roster work. That to me feels like it makes a lot of sense. And especially when his replacement feels like he's already on the roster for cheaper in Matías Rojas, who maybe we should talk about next. He's a player that Tata Martino brought in. He does have an option. We don't know how expensive that option is. He made about $500,000 this year, but the option could be worth more. It likely is worth at least some amount more. He also doesn't necessarily fit in great in a team that does have Lionel Messi. This year, we knew Messi was going to miss a ton of games because of the Copa America. But next year, that same sort of thing doesn't exist. Of course, he'll miss, 5 games because of getting games off and resting. He'll miss a couple of games maybe because of international duty, but it's not going to be this huge departure like we saw this summer from Lionel Messi. So maybe you don't need his ready-made replacement already on the roster. Do you think this affects Matías Rojas's decision? Which, again, has to come in the next 6 days.
Yeah. I think he stays. There's enough quality there for them to think this is value for money. He is good with the ball at his feet. He has a massive left foot. And he's had some good goal contributions this season. He's not always been consistent with it, but I think when given the opportunity, he does do some really good things. And I think when you talk about the value for money, I think this is a player that you can keep on the roster and be happy with as a squad player. So I think he's going to stay.
Yeah, I think Tata leaving actually makes it more likely he stays because it makes it more likely that Gressel leaves, and then you keep Rojas in that Gressel role as a guy who can play on the right wing, who can play as a midfielder, who can be sort of a dynamic athlete going, across multiple positions, and you can bring off the bench and have him make an impact, etc. You can have him in the starting lineup. It feels like those two operate in very similar ways, or at least similar positions, and so if you can move on one and keep the other, that feels like a common sense solution. And if Inter Miami moves on Julian Gressel, Matthias Rojas staying, I feel like makes a lot of sense. So I think Tata leaving actually makes it more likely we keep Rojas.
Yeah, and now that you say it out loud and I'm thinking about this, I feel like that specific position is a little bit bloated in the squad. And I think if one of them leaves, whether it's Julian Gressel or whether it's Rojas, it's actually good for the team because then you have a consistent backup option who can consistently deputize in that role. Right now, it's more so like, okay, if Lionel Messi doesn't play, we can play Julian Gressel, we can play Matthias Rojas, we can have another player play in that right wing spot. But if you have Matthias Rojas staying, then he's the out and out second choice right winger. Every time Lionel Messi is out, Matthias Rojas is in. And I like that. I like having roles on this team. And it almost feels like that Gressel Rojas, as you mentioned, is a little bit of a bloated position on this squad. So chopping that up is going to be really important. But yeah, I'd be comfortable keeping one if the other leaves. Let's just say that.
Yeah, I think the other thing about Rojas is he's going to have also value. So I think they're going to extend his contract no matter what. And whether that means they end up selling him for a profit next, at some point in the winter, or they trade him for, again, the international roster slots, the allocation money they need. I know those aren't fun things to talk about, but when you are talking about the offseason, those are huge considerations, like we saw last year when they out of nowhere traded Kamal Miller and have done previously, in the past couple seasons. There will be a trade like that out of nowhere. Lewis Morgan, another guy, that is solely a departure to bring in the sort of MLS type things that you need to make the roster work. That's a player that could have some real value. Give me another player on this roster that you're interested in.
Ooh, let me think. Who plays for Inter Miami? This one's an interesting one, and I'm excited to talk about this player. Robert Taylor.
Yeah, go ahead.
I don't know. Maybe there's a bit of life here. We've already given him the 21 gun salute. We've said goodbye to him. But is it one of those things where, hold on, maybe this is not the season finale? Tata Martino didn't necessarily use him, but I think there's definitely enough value in him as a player to at least keep him around. Again, you mentioned that there will be that one player who gets moved on for MLS reasons, and Robert Taylor seems to be the most obvious candidate for that as well. So I could be completely wrong, but it almost feels like this gives, if not a completely new lease of life to Robert Taylor, at least a toe in the door for him to be like, listen, I'm still in contention for that left wing spot now that Gomez is gone. So you never know.
Yeah, I think it makes it more likely he stays, right? I think the Tata and Robert Taylor situation was probably untenable from this point on. But again, just like all these other players we're talking about, he's a player that you can see them moving on because he has value. They can start getting some of the things they need for next year. I still don't think he's back, but I do think this increases the odds. A couple other players that maybe don't come first to mind, but what about Drake Callender? A guy who we think about the guys that Tata Martino brought in and he was very loyal to, Toto Aviles, Chelo Wiegand, Federico Redondo, guys like that. But Drake Callender helped him win a trophy in his first month and a half here and was a huge part of that. And maybe he just built a trust in Drake Callender that he never got over. And maybe this makes it more likely that Inter Miami is a new goalkeeper next year. This was something I was sort of pondering over the last couple of days. Again, we think about Tata being loyal to the guys he brought in, but loyalty to the guys that are here that he just developed a fondness for is also maybe on the table and worth talking about.
Yeah, unless it has to do with financials, I don't see Drake Callender being moved on. I think there are other positions in the squad that need to be bolstered first. So just because of upgrading the goalkeeper position, I don't think it's going to happen unless it's for financial reasons and unless they want to bring in someone who's cheaper and maybe has similar quality that they can find. then maybe we can see Drake Callender go. But I think that's slightly unlikely compared to the rest of the players.
No, I agree. I agree. Just again, looking at this list, looking at the roster, the other one I want to talk about is Campana, because Campana being a backup as a young, promising player felt okay, and it was frustrating when it was Joseph Martinez, and it was okay. It was definitely palatable when it was Higuain and it was scoring every game, and it was certainly palatable this year when Suarez was doing what Suarez was doing. But now he's becoming sort of in his mid-20s. He feels like a guy that's ready to break out in a full-time role. And he feels like he's proven enough that he deserves a chance at that. And so I wasn't convinced that we were going to get both of these guys back on the roster next year. But that's partially because Tata Martino said at the beginning of the season he only uses one striker, and he stayed true to that for most of the season. I'm curious if you think there's a chance that a new coach might be able to work with both of these guys, and maybe that's part of what the team will be looking for when they bring in a new coach. Can you make Campana, Suarez, and Messi work together?
Yeah, and it has to do with the play style. If the coach wants a striker to press from the front, I don't think that's going to be the instructions to the incoming coach. So I doubt he's going to be doing that. But Campana won't stay as a second fiddle. I don't think he will. There's too much value in that player, and he could be a first striker anywhere in the MLS for any team. So we'd rather capitalize on his value than see him sit on the bench for another season. Unless, as you mentioned, the coach can get the best out of both Campana and Suarez at the same time on the field. I don't see Campana staying. I think he's going to be used as one of those players to bring in some extra cash leeway just to make the roster compliant.
All right. Any other players that, I guess Nico Frede, another guy that you would imagine probably is gone based on this decision. He felt like a Tata Martino guy. Federico Redondo. David Martinez will be here until the summer.
Yeah.
Because he's on loan. But Redondo, a guy that you would imagine has a close relationship with Tata Martino. I think he'll be back, but maybe he decides he wants to move on. And that would be selling him to a club in Europe or something. It wouldn't be like giving him away for free. But I don't know. You think this makes it more likely or not? You think this affects?
No, I think Redondo was a club buy. I don't think he was a Tata Martino buy. Maybe he was scouted by Tata Martino, but I think the club itself seems to really like Redondo. I agree with you. I think the only way Redondo actually leaves is if he wants to leave. I think the club wants him to stay, so I don't think he's going to be sold. But unless Redondo doesn't see himself playing it into Miami anymore, I don't think he's going to go.
Well, I always thought it was curious that they brought in Redondo because they clearly wanted a midfielder that could be sort of a box-to-box type midfielder. They went after Christian Medina very hard last January. He ended up going from, I believe, Boca Juniors to Turkey, maybe. And then they brought in Redondo after they couldn't get Medina over the line. So clearly this was a position they were targeting for a huge impact player throughout most of the offseason. And that always felt weird to me when you had Busquets and you had, at the time, a defensive midfielder in Gregory, and you had Kremaski and Diego Gomez and David Ruiz and some of the younger guys. It felt like maybe you get another DM, but that's not what Redondo ended up being. So maybe Tata Martino said, we need another 8 that was a high-level 8. And now you're sort of stuck with an extra midfielder when maybe you need a 6. I don't know. I think that's something to keep an eye on.
No, you're absolutely right there, because if you put yourselves in the shoes of a new coach, right? If you and I are coaching into Miami, the first thing we're going to look at is what were the problems that this team faced. And for me, it was clear. The most obvious answer, or at least something that you can see immediately, is defensive transitions. This team has constantly struggled with defensive transitions throughout the season, at the start of the season, at the end of the season. And the only way we could actually look good was when we had a defensive midfielder on the pitch in Yannick Bright. Now, he's very young. It was his first year in the MLS. So you need to bolster that area. And if I was a coach, that would be the one position that I'd be like, bring me reinforcements there. I can't rely on just one player to be the defensive midfielder for this team. And, if he gets injured, I'm basically going to struggle whenever he's out. So, yeah, you're absolutely right. There could be a case to be made that they look to move Redondo on so that they can replace him with a more defensive sort of a midfielder, but something to keep an eye out for.
Yeah. Listen, we're going to see. We're going to do an episode once they announce the roster decisions and talk about them. And I think we'll have a clearer picture on everything that we should come to expect throughout the rest of the offseason once we get those decisions. So that'll be interesting. And if we don't get those by Monday, we'll do that this time next week. But let's talk about who could be the replacement. And the reason we're saving this towards the end is because we have no idea. We have no idea who it's going to be.
No
There
clue.
are some names floating around, but it doesn't feel like there's been a favorite announced or sort of made public like Tata Martino had been early on after Phil Neville was fired. And maybe that'll come over the weekend. Maybe that'll come after Tata officially leaves after his press conference tomorrow. But for now, there's no one name. We can speculate. There have been a few names thrown around. Xavi Hernandez was the first
Obvious
and
choice.
most obvious name that was announced in the immediate aftermath. I will say there have now been reports that he is not intending to take the Inter Miami job. Guillaume Balage mentioned that Xavi doesn't intend to join Inter Miami. He intends to take a 1-year sabbatical and then go back to coaching in Europe. So the most clear and obvious name isn't going to happen in all likelihood. But I don't know. What do you think? Is there a name you like? We can.
I think there's a
couple of the other
spark
ones.
there. I think there's a spark with Xavi. I think he is probably the front runner for this. Maybe the conversations didn't play out well, and that's why these rumors have now started to come out that he's still looking to be on sabbatical and go back to Europe soon. But I think of all the candidates that have been mentioned, I'd be okay with Xavi. I think he did well enough at Barcelona, and I'd be interested to see how he deals with this squad. Obviously, it's going to be a Barcelona reunion again. Maybe he's the one midfielder that we're looking to put into the team as well. If someone gets injured, Xavi Hernandez can suit up and play that role. But no, I'll be interested to see if it's him. I know
But
a couple of
it
others
doesn't
that
feel
were
like
mentioned.
it's trending that way, right?
Yeah, it's a weird sensation, isn't it? There's not too many rumors, and there's no excitement or buzz around any new names that have been thrown around. So it's very interesting. I think Mascherano is another one that's been thrown about. Silvino, I think, who's the Albanian manager, is another one that's been thrown around. I heard Erik ten Hag the other day, which I was like, boy, if that happens, I'll enjoy it. I think that's going to be pretty cool. But that's never going to happen. Bring me Arsene Wenger, man.
Well, let's talk about some of those names. Xavi I think he was in the UAE with his first professional coaching job, and then he coached at Barcelona for a couple years. That ended back in April.
Qatar.
What?
It was Qatar.
Sorry, in Qatar, not to the UAE. Then he coached at Barcelona, very high-profile job, something that Tata Martino was able to do. Although Xavi lasted a lot longer than Tata, he was able to win the league.
Yeah,
right?
and won the league.
He was able to win the league. So there are certainly bona fides there. Another name we've heard is Javier Mascherano, obviously another former teammate of Lionel Messi. He's been coaching the Argentine youth program for a little while now. He's been with the U20s and I guess the Olympic team. And based on what I've seen in the chat over the last 2 episodes, it doesn't feel like there's a lot of love from people that watch him closely. And then one of the other big names is Silvino, who you mentioned, another former teammate of Lionel Messi at Barcelona. He's currently the coach of Albania, but coached at Corinthians in Brazil, coached at Lyon in France. So has a couple coaching jobs. Doesn't sound like a ton of success, but I don't know, any of these names popping out to you?
Not really. And I'll be honest, the reason I'm not that excited right now, and you said that I was more excited a week ago with the prospect of Tata Martino leaving, because I think the next appointment needs to be someone that's probably not available, right? We need someone who can handle the massive personalities in the dressing room, who can deal with the messy culture. Someone who knows the MLS as well, because the MLS is a bit of a beast in itself. And for someone who doesn't have an experience in how the MLS plays out, you need a little bit of that. And I want someone who's a tactician as well. I just don't want someone who's going to be, who's going to let the players do what they want to do and just rely on the vibes. I want somebody who can actually coach some of our young players, because you want to set this team up for future as well. It's not just about the next season. So again, this is all my personal opinion. I'm not sure how the executives are thinking about it, but in an ideal world, I would want somebody who has all those factors that come together and make the perfect coach. It almost feels like Tata Martino was the perfect coach, but apparently not. So it'll be very interesting to see who it is. And once it's confirmed, I can get a little bit more excited. But as of now, nobody as such stands out. Mancini, I heard that might be a good one. I like Mancini.
Well, listen, here's the thing. All of those names, it feels like that we've heard so far have either been directly connected to Lionel Messi or potentially a few of them connected to David Beckham and what he did. And that feels limiting into what Inter Miami can actually go out and get. It feels like they could go out and get a name that they want across the world. Of course, the top 20, 30, 50 coaches in the world are going to be unavailable. But going beyond that, there's very few clubs in the world that would be more attractive to many coaches. I've seen some people talk about how coaches aren't going to leave Europe in order to come to the MLS. I think that's a silly thing. If you're a player, you don't want to go down in level because it's going to be hard to get back up a level when you only have a short career. You only have a limited amount of time at the top. You only have a limited amount of time to develop as a player. But as a coach, there's no limiting factor in terms of time and age and prestige or whatever. Like a coach can go from Europe to the MLS, spend 2 years in the MLS, and then go back to Europe and continue doing things. It's not going to markedly affect what their prestige level is back in Europe. I think people are applying that sort of maxim that happens with players and applying it to coaches. And I think that's sort of a mistake. Let's talk about Wilfred Nancy, because I see some comments in the chat. Kata, with a very nice theory on why it's going to be Wilfred Nancy. How do you feel about that?
I mean, MLS veteran, coach of the year, plays some really good football. Can he deal with Inter Miami and the scale of Inter Miami? Perhaps. I'm not against it. I will be a little bit hesitant, though, because I don't know if he has the ability to deal with everything that comes along with Inter Miami and the baggage, the ability to manage superstar players. And at the end of the day, the appointment is going to be one that Lionel Messi signs off on. And as chat has been mentioning quite frequently over the last hour, if Lionel Messi has truly enjoyed Columbus Crew's style and he likes what Wilfred Nancy has done, then maybe. But I feel like they're going to bring in somebody who is comfortable managing Lionel Messi, Sergio Busquets, and the culture that exists at Inter Miami with the superstars that we have.
Well, how many people are actually comfortable with, like, how many people have actually coached stars like that and proven to be able to do it successfully? And of those coaches, you know, there very few are going to be able to be got by Inter Miami, right? Of course, the best coaches in the world have proven they can do that. But like, if that's your expectation, I think you're setting yourself up for disappointment.
That's true.
I'll
be happy with Wilfred Nancy. I'll be very happy with Wilfred Nancy.
Well, I want to talk about Wilfred Nancy because I think there's a 0% chance this is happening. And I think there's a 0% chance Inter Miami would even want Wilfred Nancy, because Wilfred Nancy, as we mentioned earlier in the show, is a coach you build a project around. He has a built system that he wants to bring and develop and bring players into so that his system will be what wins them games. It's obviously very effective, but when you're dealing with Inter Miami right now with Lionel Messi, Suarez, Jordi Alba, you need a coach that can be flexible enough to get the best out of them, not a coach that's going to say, you guys have to do what I want you to do. So
Thank you. I think you said that a lot more eloquently than I did, but that's exactly what I was trying to get at. You need somebody who's able to manage that culture of letting them play their own style of football.
Yeah. And part of what we saw this year is Tata struggling to figure out how to do that, right? Again, he won a lot of games, so I don't want to take that away from him, but it also never felt like this team was ever better for stretches at a time than the sum of its parts. In a few occasions, we saw what this team was absolutely capable of, but those were an incredible half against the New York Red Bulls, a great game against Orlando City, but few and far between. There was no consistent dominance from this team like you would imagine the talent on this team would say is possible, especially at home. And so I think that it's going to be hard for any coach to come in here. And that's why I want to spend the last couple of minutes talking about what is a realistic expectation, not in terms of names, but in terms of profile of coach that Inter Miami fans should be expecting and what Inter Miami should be going out and looking for.
So we've just said everything that a coach shouldn't do. So basically, just the reverse of that, someone who can get the best out of the squad, who promotes the youth, and play some dynamic football that's dominating. Because, as you mentioned, a lot of the times this season, we didn't play dominating football. We didn't play football that we knew the squad was capable of doing. So you have all these pieces together. You have all these really well assembled, you have a very well assembled squad. You just need somebody who can get the best out of it, whether he's going to be a Spanish speaker, whether he's going to be an absolute tactical genius, whether he's going to be a great man manager. You need somebody who can get the best out of this team, because if you can't do that at this point in time in Inter Miami's history, you're going to fail. So, and that's a big ask as well. It's not going to be easy at all. Maybe we don't get a coach better than Tata Martino, but if he's able to manage the team better and actually set the team up in a way that they're able to go out, express themselves, and play football that we know we're capable of playing, then perhaps they can be a better success than Tata Martino.
I think A says it right in the chat. I believe we won't get a better coach than Tata Martino. And I want to rephrase that. I think that we're not going to get a better coach than Tata Martino on paper. And I think Inter Miami fans should be prepared for that. Tata Martino was a very good hire on paper. In fact, probably one of the best hires in MLS history on paper. A guy who had already won the MLS Cup, right? Very few coaches have won the MLS Cup and have coached at an incredibly high level in Europe and have coached superstars and have known and knows how to do that, and has coached lower levels where he hasn't been the favorite, right? Guys like Pep Guardiola have always been at a top club. He's done both, right? So in terms of the breadth of experience, the ability to work with superstar players and have a good relationship with them, and then, of course, MLS success, it's hard to beat what Tata Martino had on paper. Go ahead. I'm sorry. I'm about to cough, so go ahead.
No, I agree with what Ash says. We need a manager who feels a cohesive team and not a mob of 11 players, right? You can have individual talent, but you need to make sure all those talents work together as a team. And sometimes I wonder whether in new modern football that Pep Guardiola has made us accustomed to, which I don't like at all, it feels like we get lost too much in the tactics side of things. But I think man managers are very underrated. So someone who can manage this team and manage the personalities could almost maybe get more out of this team than any tactician out there. So we'll see. We'll see how it plays out and who it's going to be. But I'm not sure if there's an ideal candidate who's going to make us feel really good, right? So we'll see.
Well, and that's, I guess, my point. And apologies, I'm about to go off on a coughing trip, so we're going to have to end this soon. But you need a coach who is going to get the best out of his players. And that's not always obvious based on the resume. Yeah. You need a coach that's going to make timely substitutions, and that's not always obvious by the resume. And you need a coach who's going to be good in tournaments, and that's not always apparent on their resume. And you need a coach that can handle the great players. And sometimes that is a little bit more easy to see on a resume, but the coaches that have proven that on a resume aren't necessarily entirely interested in Inter Miami, right? You're talking about the best coaches in the world. So the four things Inter Miami really wants in this coach, I think it's going to be really hard to find on paper. So that's why I think they need to go out and figure and do their research in a way that we can't, because we don't know who's available and we don't have 40 hours a week to work.
I mean, if they want me and you to coach the team, I'd be happy to, right?
Yeah. If they give us a contract to go find a player. No. Just give us a contract to go find the new coach. We'll happily take.
Yeah, we'll do a good job. Yeah,
we'll consult with them on that. But I guess my final point that I want to end with this on is, I don't think we're going to get a big name. I don't think we're going to get a coach whose resume pops off. I think it's going to be a coach that someone in the organization, whether it's Chris Henderson or Raul Sanllehi or Lionel Messi, has said, I've gone against this coach over the years, or maybe I've worked with this coach, but I've watched this coach over the last couple of years, and I see he does the one or two things that Inter Miami needs. And so it might not be obvious on paper, but that doesn't mean it's not a good hire. That doesn't mean it's not the right hire. And that's, I think, the point I wanted to get across with this whole conversation is, it doesn't have to be Xavi or Zidane or any of the other names that are going on in the chat. It just has to be a guy that can tweak the little things that Inter Miami is a little off on, because, again, They had the most talented roster in MLS history this year. Probably next year, I think it might be slightly less just because you're losing Diego Gomez and you're going to have to shovel things around. But it's still going to be right up there. It's going to be the best roster in the league. Can the coach convert with silverware? And we won't know until he gets here. But I am excited that Inter Miami is trying.
And I'm also excited about us because we're going to have to do some research into whoever comes in. And I think it's going to be fun doing some new tactical analysis and just understanding the playing style and identity of the new coach, whoever it is that they bring in. Whatever said and done, man, we're on a new journey. Off-season has started and it'll be an interesting time. So stick around, guys. We have a lot to talk about.
Before we go, I have one more thing I wanted to talk about with you. So give me 5 more minutes. This coach is a hire for the next 1 to 2 years maximum, right? That's all that's in mind. There's no because I saw some people talking about this on Twitter about how you can potentially hire a coach that's going to help you build what comes after Messi. That's not the point of this. If that's what they were thinking about, they might as well have kept Tata Martino, who I think probably is more suited for that type of role than what he is with Messi and co. If that was the case, they could go get Wilfred Nancy. They could go get Jim Curtin. That's not what's going to happen. Those guys are guys you look at to bring in and pay the bag 2 years from now, after you open the new stadium, after Messi decides he's ready to retire and potentially become an owner. It's all about next year and maybe 2 years, but really it's all about how can we win the CONCACAF Champions Cup next year? How can we win the MLS Cup next year? Who is a winner that is going to give us that little bit of an advantage? And I don't know. That's what it is. So those are my expectations for the new coach. And I think we're going to find out over the next couple of weeks who that's going to be.
Jose Mourinho.
All right. Final words, Saur.
Yeah. Exciting times. None of us thought that this would actually happen. I know we all wanted Tata Martino to leave eventually, but it happened sooner than we thought it would. There's a lot going to be happening about Inter Miami, guys. We're going to get some player decisions soon. We're going to start hearing about who the new coach might be. So stick around. We thought the offseason might be a bit boring, but that's completely changed. So the driving dialogue is going to be there. We're going to talk about everything under the sun related to Inter Miami. And as always, it's an absolute pleasure to talk Inter Miami with you, Scotty, and with the fans. So keep joining us, keep talking to us, and we'll see you very, very soon. Okay, sign us off.
All right, guys, we'll be back on likely Monday. If the roster announcements drop before then, we'll talk all about the roster announcements. If not, we have our final top 20 roster ready to go, and we'll do that draft and just have a little fun with that and talk about each player because I've always enjoyed doing that. But until then, guys, enjoy the night, enjoy your weekend, and let's just root for Orlando City to lose, and then we'll all be happy and we can feel better about the season. All right, guys, see you next time.